Top story of this hour, first group of South Africans were evacuated from Sudan, expected to land at the OR Tambo International Airport. The evacuation has been facilitated by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Sudan has plunged into chaos after the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces clashed. Khayelihle Khumalo joins us now. Kaya, good afternoon. I know we've been waiting with bated breath. We believe that rather shortly the first group is set to land. Perhaps you can tell us about the dynamics unfolding. When exactly are they expected?
Well, absolutely. Very complex dynamics here. I mean, you look at so many days that the Department of International Relations and Cooperation and many other partners spent in making sure that these South Africans are evacuated from Sudan, but also just talking about the issue of, just moving from one country to another in a very unstable environment. So those are some of the challenges that the authorities in South Africa have been facing in making sure that South Africans are evacuated from Sudan. A very precarious situation even, but we do understand that they got into these buses, others travel via Egypt, and also there were some challenges pertaining to the travel documents because it is a very fluid situation. Others were able to leave their properties in Sudan primarily without any form of documentation, so which was a bit of a challenge when they got to the other side. But today we're expecting about 10 South Africans to land right here at OR Tambo International Airport, and we do understand that they used the port of Sudan and then they moved into Saudi Arabia, into Jeddah, and now so they'll have this opportunity to land here at home. But obviously there is a great deal of excitement from the families. We're expecting to hear from them during the course of the afternoon, but also there's a bit of a sigh of relief as well for the families, especially because their loved ones are caught up in this conflict in Sudan.
Absolutely, Kaya. You speak about, the evacuation process riddled with complexities as evacuees had to use a number of countries and methods to get back home. The excitement, sigh of relief from the families at large, perhaps as they await, the arrival of their family members. We're obviously looking at, upon landing, some of the families having to rebuild and start from scratch. Do we know what kind of support is going to be needed on that front as we await their imminent arrival?
So by all accounts, it was a very assiduous task from the perspective of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation to facilitate this. But thankfully, with the assistance of the likes of the gift of the givers, they were able to rise to the occasion. But something also that they did emphasize was that they weren't just going to rescue the diplomatic staff, but they really wanted to make sure that their strategy is quite broad, where they do evacuate South Africa, but also some neighboring countries as well, some citizens from countries like Angola and many others as well who are neighboring South Africa. But also you hear about, just a number of challenges really that they had to deal with, especially because, other countries are quite suspicious if you try to enter without any travel document. So, for example, in Egypt, we do understand that initially, some South Africans were not allowed to get in. So there were lots of interventions that were applied, and eventually, they were able to get a green light and be able to get through. But also, something also that we do understand is that the Saudi Arabian government as well has been very helpful. South African diplomatic missions in Egypt and also in Saudi Arabia, they've been really on the ground to make sure that they really just rise to the occasion and make sure that this process, notwithstanding all the series of challenges that they face, but they're able to and try and make it as seamless as possible.
Kaya, we're obviously awaiting the first group of South African evacuees to arrive this afternoon at the OR Tambo International Airport. Perhaps as we look at the dynamics, though, in Sudan, based on the ceasefire, based on what's unfolding there, what do we know about the situation in Sudan as we speak?
A very unstable situation in Sudan, especially because as much as you had a ceasefire that had been put in place, there are some sporadic attacks that have been reported in so many parts of the country. And obviously there's a great deal of concern given geographically where Sudan is located, not far from the Sahel region, not far from the Horn of Africa, a very strategic country. It's the third largest country in Africa. So if you really have a full-on civil war, the implications will be far-reaching, not just for Sudanese, but also for that region, especially because also there are a lot of dynamics at play here, especially because we do understand that on the ground there are fears, the food insecurity, where the hospitals as well are crumbling, where the healthcare facilities is really on the verge of collapse. So really facing quite a myriad of challenges. But from the likes of South Africa, there has been consistent calls for the cessation of hostilities, but also you do understand that the regional organization, IGAD, as well, has been calling for peace and really just making a very impassioned plea to the rival generals. That's, of course, General al-Burhan, who's the de facto ruler in Sudan, and also General Hemeti as well, calling for these two powerful leaders to make sure that they speak to their forces to respect the ceasefire, but also to make sure that the accord that has been signed in Sudan is respected by all parties. So it's a very unstable situation, and it continues really to face quite a very sad situation.
Kai, just very quickly in conclusion, from our vantage point on the screen, it seems that you are obviously stationed at the international arrivals section at the OR Tambo International Airport. We're trying to monitor dynamics and understand, when exactly they're set to arrive. Can you give us an indication, a definite time of sorts?
Well, so far the information we have in our disposal is that they'll be arriving at 4:15, and it's going to be Emirates flight, and obviously they might be very jet-lagged, but a lot of them are quite excited to be back home because others, they really went to Sudan based on business and many other really activities that they had in Khartoum. But also it's going to be quite a very fairly easy process, because as soon as they disembark, they'll be going through the immigration control, and then eventually they'll be just walking out of the arrival terminal to really just get an opportunity as well. We do understand that there might be officials from the Department of International Relations, so you may understand that there was an advisory that was issued that the first batch of South Africans from Sudan will be arriving tomorrow. So subsequently, there has been really drastic changes, because the first batch is arriving today, and we do understand that today it's going to be 10 people arriving in South Africa. So they'll be coming from different groups, because they are scattered all over the neighbors of Sudan. Others are in Egypt, others of course are in Saudi Arabia. So it's been quite a very extensive process also for the Department of International Relations, really just working with so many governments as well, trying to negotiate with them, especially because really quite a number of challenges that the evacuees are facing. A lot of them, they really didn't have a luxury to take certain very primary items with them. So it's going to be a very interesting time, as well as their families as well are keenly waiting here to make sure that they see them. There'll be hugs. There'll be, just a very joyous occasion, so to speak.
Absolutely, Kai. It's been a multi-pronged approach by various stakeholders to execute this operation successfully. Obviously, we understand you are at the OR Tambo International Airport awaiting the imminent arrival of the first group of South African evacuees, expected to arrive in just a few short minutes. Thank you very much to Khayelihle Khumalo for that update. Again, a developing story we will continue to keep you updated on as the story unfolds during our bulletins this afternoon here on the SABC.